Well, I can only imagine how tough it is to maintain integrity and good character in the high-power corporate world. And my guests today have lived in that world. Dennis Spencer worked as a top executive for one of the world's leading sports television companies and was in charge of televising the Boston Marathon on the day of the bombing. Steve Ellsworth oversaw a billion-dollar Fortune 500 company with 3,000 employees, serving 70,000 clients per day. And I can't wait to talk to them about character. Hi, everyone. My name is Doug Newton, and this is a special series called People Worth Admiring. Now, my regular weekly podcast, At the Intersection, is all about showing you how to develop your character to engage our culture with grace and fresh impact in your corner of the world. And I know no greater way to develop character than the power of admiration. But who should you admire? See, that's the question. And in this special series, I present you with some great options. People whose stories and comments will inspire you and shape your character because they are people worth admiring. Well, again, welcome. It's guest month here, August 2023, and this is the fourth week of a 5-week series, People Worth Admiring, and I can't wait for you to meet Dennis Spencer and Steve Ellsworth. Now, Dennis is on the road a lot, but we were able to pin him down today at his home in Washington, D.C., and Steve is coming to us from his ranch in Divide, Colorado, where he gets to wake up to the sun and Pikes Peak every morning when he's home. So what do you say? Let's meet these guys. I'm just really pleased to be able to have our people viewing and listening, having a chance to talk to two people that I invited today because of a career, very long careers, both of them, in the high-power corporate world. And we're wanting to look at character in that kind of context today. But they're also men who are deeply committed to Jesus Christ, deeply committed to different kinds of ministry and forms of service. And so that's going to come out as well. Without any more, hey, Dennis, just tell us a little bit about your background. You know, I read your resume, and I think people are going to be really interested. So kind of give an overview of that.
Well, thank you, Doug. First of all, I'm certainly very flattered that you invited me to join Steve in this, and congratulations on this great initiative of yours in building character. It's just so important in our world today. Well, I'm just an old boy from Oklahoma, and I grew up loving sports. And you know, if you'd asked me what I want to be when I grow up, I want to be the center fielder for the New York Yankees. And fortunately, at age 12, I realized that was never going to happen. So I didn't have to wade through all of adolescence, because maybe that's the smartest thing I ever done was to know, don't pursue that. But if you want to be in sports, figure out something else. So I've just been blessed to have a career in sports, primarily in sports television. As I move toward retirement at the end of the year, I'm the executive vice president at Sport 5, which is one of the major sports marketing, media, and athlete representation companies in the world, based in Hamburg, Germany. We have about 1,500 employees, and we're active across all kinds of various things related to sports. My specialty is television and media, so I'm in charge of all the company's media efforts in North and South America. You know, it's been a lot of fun, and for somebody who always loved sports, it's been fantastic.
Well, you know, one of the things I'm going to say in just a minute about who you are and what I really admire about you has to do with humility. You know, you're not quick to drop names. I want you to drop some names here. I'm asking you to just to let the people know some of the athletes that you've worked with, and maybe some of the major events that you've been directly involved with producing and so forth.
Well, you know, in my business, I represent television properties like many people represent, like other people represent athletes. And I've been fortunate enough to be involved with some high profile companies that have had great athletes as part of them, from Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Phil Mickelson, Andre Agassi, and on and on. We've had, right now I think we have about 100 clients under contract that our team works with. Specifically, I focus on the television properties. So my clients have included the U.S. Open Tennis Championships, CONCACAF, which is the governing body for soccer in
Mm-hmm.
this hemisphere, the United States Soccer Federation, the Tour de France, the NBA, the Final Four. Done a lot and done a lot in soccer. I was fortunate enough to be the promoter of the first soccer game in the new Yankee Stadium, which was Chelsea versus Paris Saint Germain, and then we just came off the Champions Soccer Tour this year, which had Real Madrid and Barcelona, Juventus, AC Milan, and some other teams. And then last year we did. I was able to executive produce Bayern Munich versus Manchester City at Lambeau Field, which I think was the first big soccer game they'd had at Lambeau Field.
Mm.
And kind of the my I guess labor of love, although I hardly put it labor, is my client, the Boston Athletic Association and the Boston Marathon,
Mm.
uh,
And
which is
you were involved in Mark Wahlberg's movie uh, about the bombing and so forth. Is that right?
yeah, one thing that's one of my kids kind of pointed out to me about a month or so ago was if you look at kind of the two tragic terrorist events in the United States, I've kind of had a brush with both of them.
Hmm.
9/11, I was handling the international media rights for the U.S. Open Tennis Championships, and I had scheduled a staff meeting for that Monday morning uh, of the attack on the World Trade Center for our office in Midtown Manhattan. But on Sunday morning, I could see that everybody was just so tired, including myself. I said, "Let's just all go home
Hmm.
and we'll just convene. We'll just have a conference call on Tuesday." So, fortunately, all of my team was able to be out of New York when it happened on the Monday, and I ended
Hmm.
up, I think, our Japanese broadcast crew of about 30, 40 people ended up being stuck there for about 2 or 3 weeks. So, and then
Hmm.
at Boston, of course, as you mentioned, the bombing was certainly a horrific event. And out of that, I was able to, through my client, the Boston Athletic Association, work with Mark Warburg and Peter Berg to put together the movie that's called Patriots Day,
Hmm.
which, you know, more of a reenactment of the actual bombing and the capture, as opposed to the aftermath of the people that suffered a lot of loss.
Yeah. Well, your work has brought you into a lot of travel in order to do those things around the world and so forth. Is that right?
And about 200 days a year.
Yeah.
So my
Well,
wife says that we have such a great marriage.
we may need to talk about that a little bit later. What's behind that. I may have to rescind some of my reason for having you on. Say, so okay. So for a lot of us, those are things that we readily recognize. Those kind of sports events and so forth. I'm a huge Tour de France fan. I watch every single stage, either live or later. So just knowing somebody who is involved with that is kind of impressive. But Steve, yours is not on kind of the front of everything, but you worked in an executive role with a Fortune 500 company that probably everybody has some connection with sometime in their life. Can you tell people about that?
Yeah, so I guess if I kind of start backwards a little bit in my life experiences, my final 27 years of my professional career was with a company called Quest Diagnostics. Quest Diagnostics is known throughout the country as one of the largest national commercial laboratories in the world, actually, and it is the largest here in the United States. Quest, like many large companies, breaks its company up either through or its operations up through either the company lines of business or geographically. Quest did it geographically because of the type of business it was. I had the privilege of running various businesses for them the last 27 years, as I said. And the final 6, I guess, were, I was a regional vice president in Florida. Florida, while there was only 8 regions in the company, Florida was the 4th largest region. We were knocking on the doors of being a $1 billion business when I left. We took care of roughly 70,000 patients a day, and just in the state of Florida. So it was, fairly good sized operation. It had 3,000 some employees with it, and you can just kind of imagine trying to take care of that many people per day in 2 different lab operations. Just the logistics of it and management of the overall operation
So
was,
what? So
challenging and rewarding, et cetera.
So just so people understand, so when they go to the hospital or to a doctor or something, and they get some, some work done on them, testing and everything, and things get sent off to a lab. Okay, so that's happened to almost all of us. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, exactly. We would take care of reference testing that would come from doctor's offices and hospitals, usually kind of behind the scenes. In the state of Florida, it was a little bit different in that in Florida, a doc would actually give a script to a patient, and a patient would typically go to a patient service center in Florida. And of those 70,000 patients a day that I was speaking of, we would actually pull the blood out of put a needle in and pull the blood out of 23,000 people a day. So again, you can imagine the logistics of that, not making mistakes, not doing simple things like sticking a needle where it shouldn't be, either in
Yeah.
somebody's thumb, an employee's thumb, or in a patient themselves. And so, it's quite a challenge, and you have rigorous training that goes into it, enforcement of rules, and those kinds of things. But that was the operation side of the business. The sales side of the business is much more fun, in that we were a fairly dominant player in the marketplace. We were the largest laboratory in the Florida market, and so when it comes to running a business, being the top dog, if you will, in that place, it makes it challenging to stay the top dog because everybody's gunning for you, but also the fact that you are negotiating everything from a position of strength.
And
So
I mean,
you're kind of the ultimate Count Dracula, I guess.
yeah,
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Good way.
because
Yeah, well, there's all kinds of blood jokes that go down in the
yeah.
Yeah, I
lab.
bet.
Yeah, you can imagine. Yeah.
But
So,
you were a turnaround expert, kind of. I mean, you were thrown into
well, yeah.
situations that required, like, okay, things are going to have to change.
Yeah, well, there was a couple of different places in my career. Specifically, when I was in the Midwest, I ran the division out of St. Louis for a number of years, also, and I got handed a couple of different situations there that were turnarounds. One was successful, one was not, and so yeah, I had the privilege, I guess I'll say air quotes, privilege of doing a couple of turnarounds. Obviously, when you do a turnaround and it's successful, it's quite gratifying. When it's not, it's hard.
Mm.
It's you're standing in front of people and you're telling them some bad news about what's going to happen to their location, and it's the difficult sides of things. And you were speaking earlier about character, and that's it's playing it down the line straight with them as to what's going to happen. You're not trying to be cruel about it, but you want to be forthright with people on how they are, what's going to happen in the situation that they're finding themselves in. Because clearly, when you're in a turnaround situation, you've tried it, you've changed plans, you've made changes, you've probably changed out personnel, policies, strategies, and so you're trying to give people updates as to what's going on. And at some point, you got to let them know whether we're going to continue to try to turn this place around, or is something more drastic going to happen?
Did you find that? So I'm going to put up on the screen here. I mean, these are traits that I work with as kind of a target 12 that I consider to be just vital in not only a Christian's life, but just in terms of relating to people, doing work well, and so forth. And the word integrity there, actually, it's one of the reasons that I chose both of you, because of what I do know of you. both from personal experience and actual facts, as well as some assumptions I make, that a person like either one of you guys, you really can't be in that kind of a role for long without having integrity, without people being able to trust you, count on, of you shooting straight and so forth. So Steve and Dennis both, that's one of the reasons that I admire you. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to interview you here today. So tell me just a little bit about how integrity reveals itself in that. Like, so for example, you're gonna have to give people some bad news. I think both of you probably have been in that position. What's integrity look like?
I would say integrity is the bedrock of all the various values that you've put up there. I think integrity in your life, no matter what walk you're in, whether you're in your professional life or in your personal life. I mean, let's face it, as a parent of children, if you don't have integrity when you're trying to parent children, they see through it very quickly. And it's the same thing in a management role. Integrity is critical key. You can't say one thing and do another. You have to walk the talk. And it's critical that a person have integrity. Again, if you don't, people will very quickly figure out that you're not what you say or represent that you are, and they will very quickly turn away from you and not believe in you as a leader. So I think it's critical to have integrity.
And I think kind of, I don't know, Steve, if you'd agree, but kind of paired along with that, and I agree with everything you just said. And for both of us in the big companies we've been in, to me, that needs to be kind of coupled with the secret sauce of humility and a humbleness, because you've got to be sure not only do your people, kind of respect your integrity, but that you deal with them with a humbleness and a kind of an empathetic way that they can really relate to. And in our businesses, where it's full of quadruple type A personalities and gigantic egos and dog eat dog, to me, the effective way has been to marry kind of a humbleness, which is super counterintuitive, with with integrity to get not only to get the best results for the company, but also for personal satisfaction.
So what does humility look like? And, give me an actual, can be hypothetical, but give me an actual situation where humility, how it looks.
Well, it's, you build it over time with your team, and it's a couple things. It's one, at least for in our business, being willing to do or having done everything you ask them to do. There's a humbleness, there's an in the trenches mentality to me that comes with that, and it's second, just being relatable to all the people in the organization. You find so often that people that are lower in the organization just get run over by the executives, and the executive that's able to build that layer of staff member up, whether it be as simple as, can I get you a cup of coffee? Can I buy you a cup of coffee? How's your kid doing? Those kinds of things coupled with integrity, I think, are what really make effective leaders.
How do you remember, talking about people's, how's your kid and everything? Did you use any techniques so that you wouldn't forget, so that you would? I mean, obviously you pay attention to what people are saying, and that helps. But you've got so many things going on in your mind all the time in the kind of high power roles that you guys had. How do you even relate to people in that kind of a personal way?
I write a lot of people write it down.
I'll give you one, just a basic thing. And I would travel to various locations, and it would just be the simple thing of, you meet somebody in the hallway, the parking lot, whatever it is. greet the security guy at the door. You greet everybody. You look them in the eye. Good morning, good afternoon. How you doing? Just something to acknowledge that their presence, that they're not just somebody you're walking by, and that you're the big guy, and you're not going to have to do any sort of acknowledgement of them, even as a human being. But if I could go back just a little
Yeah,
bit, Doug,
go for it. Yeah.
also, um, what you were talking about earlier about being the humble humility. Yeah, I agree with everything Dennis says, by the way. But I think of it in the terms of uh, servant leadership. Christ was the ultimate one in that. And basically, the concept is as a leader, I do whatever I need to do to help you do your job, no matter what that is. I break down the walls, I find the resources, I overcome to help you do your job to make you successful. So it's the concept of having, you're at the bottom of the pyramid and you're helping the organization expand and grow and fulfill their different duties that have been assigned or what's they're responsible for in their various areas through the servant leadership.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually,
And that
go ahead.
that spills over so totally to your personal life, or maybe that's the key to your personal life, which is as a husband and father to be sure that your number one goal is that your wife, your kids, and then your friends are able to reach their fullest best potential in their lives, and that they're happy and fulfilled, and that you have, whatever you need to do to make that happen in the servant leadership role, you really need to focus on that, I think. And so it's both personal and professional.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I hope our viewers and listeners are really paying attention to this, because it's painting a picture of humility that isn't kind of the stock assumption that we make, that most people think that being humble means you kind of just sort of are putting yourself down and to make yourself lower than other people. Oh, I don't have that much to offer, or whatever. But what both you guys are saying is, and it's at the heart of what I try to teach about humility is exalting others above yourself. And you wind up having the same effect. If you put yourself down, okay, there's going to be that distance between you and the other person's status or whatever, but you can achieve the same thing by putting other people up. You still have this kind of humble position, but it's by focusing on others and helping them, Steve, just like you said, helping them to be successful, helping them to have all of the obstacles removed so that they can do their best and so forth. I love it. Yeah. Let me pop back to these traits here and give our folks another reason. Obviously, both of you guys rank high on my list in the whole area of industry. It's an old-fashioned word, but it's the idea of working as hard as necessary to get a job done and then looking for more to do. You're not just industrious just by working hard. It's just that person who gets something done and then they're going, okay, what's next? Let's move on. Let's go after something else. And again, both of you guys really exemplify that in my mind. What has shaped you all? I mean, how did you become these kind of people where you could have this kind of sort of high-powered job requiring the high-power kind of effort, energy, vision, strategic thinking and everything, but still have these kind of convictions, these character convictions? And either one of you can roll off with this.
Let me start with this. A couple of you had shown us previously what this list was going to be, so we had a little bit of prep for, in all fairness to our audience.
Yeah.
But there's two words on there that I think embody the list that are not on the list that I'd almost add that I use for myself quite often, and it's grit and rigor. Mm-hmm. So grit I think encompasses a number of those different attributes that you're describing there. Yeah. And grit is really seeing it through no matter what it is. When you state a goal, when you set out a strategy for executing it, whatever it is, there's going to be hard. There's going to be difficult times. And you've got to figure out, you've got to be industrious. You've got to figure out what those solutions are in order to achieve that goal. And typically these things are long term. They're not just short term. And so you've got to have that character, that whatever that drive is in you, that you're going to give it all. You may not achieve it, but you're sure going to try to get there.
Yeah.
Personally, that came from, I believe it came from my parents. My parents were both blue collar folks. They didn't make a lot of money, but we always had. Don't get me wrong, we weren't poor or anything like that, but they worked hard every day. They did their job, and then we came home and we worked. They worked in a huge garden that we had to can vegetables and those kinds of things. We raised our own, calves for slaughter, for beef. Just those kind of things that you learn when you're growing up that you carry over into your life. I worked on a farm there locally. I was raised in Greenville, Illinois. Worked on a farm locally and learned a lot from the farm family that I worked for on again what you do to achieve the goal of whatever it is that you're trying to do at that particular phase of the seasons that you're in. And so I think it's just all that work ethic is developed at a young age. It comes into play then, and you realize that once you get out into the world, that work ethic that you have can separate you very quickly from the others. You may not be the smartest, you may not be the best trained, but if you've got a work ethic, if you've got a grit, that is very quickly noticed in the work world. It's appreciated, and it opens up doors of opportunity for you that maybe you wouldn't have gotten, again, just because you're necessarily the most intelligent person. You can have all the brains, but if you don't have the common sense and the work ethic to put it all to use, to bring it all together, then you're not going to be as successful as you can.
Yeah, I'm going to come back around to that in a minute because I got a question that's, I think, an important question. But Dennis, what about you? What the big influences on your life in terms of things that you value right now in your character and so forth?
Well, very similar to Steve in the industriousness. That was just instilled in me at a young age by my parents. And I remember when I was leaving home for my first job after college, leaving the Midwest and going out to Los Angeles, my dad said, I want to give you one piece of advice. Never leave the office before your boss. Which was great advice, which labored on me a little bit since my boss never left the office before like 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
In my first job. I was a lot of times just sitting around there. But and then as Steve said, part of industriousness, is there are a lot of smart people in his business and in my business, and sometimes the only way to keep up is just to be industrious, to have that grit and rigor and stick to it, since you and put in the effort to really kind of outwork the competition in a smart way, I think is so important.
Okay, so that both of you lead to this question. So a lot of young people did not have parents like you. They didn't have models when they were growing up of people. They didn't have voices speaking into their lives, saying the kind of things that your parents did. And yet now they're out there and they're out in the workforce, and maybe just okay, they've never had that grit, that rigor, that perseverance. It hasn't been an attribute of theirs, and they're hearing you and they're going, yeah, if I want to get ahead, if I want to get some things accomplished, I'm going to have to really get tougher or whatever. What do you say to them? What could they do? What could somebody do who didn't have that shaping influence when they were younger, but they see the need now? Is there a way that you have seen some people get stronger, find more grit than they had when they first came in, or what would you say?
Well, I think the way I would go about maybe instructing somebody, in today's world, the availability, just like these talks that we're doing right now, or TED Talks, or whatever it might be, you can find that inspiration. You can find that person you want to model yourself after. I guess that would be the one thing I would say that I did early on in my career. I may not always liked my bosses or even respected some of them, to be honest with you, but I always learned something from it. It could be what not to do. as much as what to do in a given situation. And so I would just encourage them to look around at folks that they could be colleagues of theirs, but more than likely it's going to be somebody who's a bit older than them, and pick up the different attributes and model yourself after what you see is what it is that you think are an element of what's driving their success.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what these interviews are all about. I mean, I intentionally named them People Worth Admiring, because I think that is the heart of developing characters. You got to first see an image, a model of the kind of person that you want to be, and get drawn toward it. Dennis, what about you? Is there some advice that you give someone?
Well, I think, and it also goes the other way. It's kind of top down. So I know that Steve has mentored a lot of people along the way. I've tried to do that too, but it's definitely a challenge for kids today to get, as they enter the workplace. I joke with a lot of people when I used to be doing interviews that I'm probably not smart enough to get my job now. So there's a there's a big challenges, but again, it's you don't have to hit the home run right at first. Get a single, find somebody you admire, get close to them, go the extra mile in your first job. Do that extra bit of work, and that will, to a large extent, carry you in good stead. I mean, I always tell our interns, volunteer across other areas of the company, and do more. I used to, and I don't know if this is probably not help, but it shows where my mindset was back when I was doing more interviews many years ago. If a student, if a prospective employee, young kid, would in the first interview ask how much vacation time they got, that was almost an automatic disqualifier for me. Not because it's not important, but because that was that showed the mindset that particular person wanted a job, not a career. And I was looking for people that wanted a career.
Yeah, you reminded me of a story I'll share real quick along that same line. So I'm running a region. I'm whatever managing director. I was the guy, right, running the business, and I'm getting ready to interview somebody, and I would purposely have them left in the lobby, right, and I would walk from my office and go get them. I didn't send my assistant after them or anybody else. I purposely wanted to do this because there were tests right at the very beginning. When I walked into the lobby and would look them in the eye and say, "Hello, I'm Steve Ellsworth," and I'm walking toward them with my hand extended, did they stay seated or did they immediately stand, shake my hand, look in the eye? You're looking for little tests like that. Then I'm a fairly fast walker, and I know I am, but it's also a test. We're going to walk back to my office. And are you lagging way behind me? Or are you keeping pace with me right up front? And I know it may sound a little silly, but if you didn't pass those two tests right off the bat, you're going to have a hard time getting through the rest of the interview with me. You're starting below grade, if you will. So it's just little things like that may seem like they're not a big deal, but employers are looking for those kinds of things. Those are just little tests.
But Doug, I would say, both Steve and I and you are very involved at Greenville University. And, one of the things that the university has taken a turn on is doubling down really on experiential learning. And those kinds of, and so we're trying to speak into those kids through the instruction they get, not only in the classroom, but instruction they get on their internships in the field and the experience they get in the field, because that's where you learn it. So, for young kids that come to me, I'd say volunteer, get an internship. If you can afford not to get paid, don't get paid. Makes you a little hungrier. But do everything that you can do to immerse yourself in the field in which you're passionate about.
Yeah, one of the things that I've got two more things that I want to drop in here, and then we'll try to draw it down to a close. One about Dennis and one about Steve. And I mentioned to our viewers the last three that we've done. At some point I'm probably going to be interviewing people that I don't know that well. But the reason why I'm working with people that I know well is because that's what you do, is you look for people you admire and you just pay attention to them. And so, yeah, I know you guys well enough to have seen some ways in which you operate. So Dennis, I spoke at a family camp a year or more ago. And at that family camp was a young girl who was very interested in television and kind of getting into the production end of things. And I told her, I said, I know somebody that's kind of in that world. And I sent you an email and told you about her. And folks, Dennis is a busy, busy man. But he treated that as a young girl just coming out of college, and he really went after helping by trying to get her in touch with the right people. It was 2 or 3 emails back and forth to try to help set all of that up. And that said a huge deal to me, because a lot of people at your level of work, you don't have, I mean, even if you wanted to, you would go, but I don't have the time. But you made sure you took the time. That was wonderful. Then Steve, I've told you this before and probably can't and shouldn't go into a lot of detail, but the way you've stepped out into kind of you retired, sort of, so to speak, but the way you have poured yourself into your role, and now becoming chairman of the board of trustees for Greenville University, it was just remarkable to me at how you could make this transition from a very high-power corporate world, but bring some of those principles in. And in the middle of it, you would even be saying things like, now I'm learning to relate in a new way. This is, I'm bringing these kind of principles in here, but I'm learning, I'm growing and everything. And I just thought, you don't see a lot of type A alpha dog kind of people that are even caring about where do I need to shift. So here's the question. I want to draw it down to a close. Both of you, I know, Dennis, you are retiring soon. Steve, you're already involved very heavily in GU, and also Dennis, chairman of the Christian music program in Nashville on behalf of GU. So you're busy people. What are you at this stage in your life, if there was an area that you're saying, I'm still wanting to work on this area of character in my life, what would you say? What's on the front burner in your mind? One of you go first.
Go ahead, Dennis.
Well, I was thinking about the kind of the influences in my life, and certainly a major influence in my life was a sports executive named Bob Reiner, who in 1993 wrote a book called Roaring Lambs with the subtitle "A Gentle Plan to Radically Change the World." And the premise of the book a little bit was, again, I don't want to be too flip, but that sometime in the 1960s, the church lost Sundays to the NFL. And it changed the whole dynamic of the church and how we speak into our Christian faith. So, to have the kind of the solid, get solid Christian thinking seems like it's almost never a part of the conversation in our society and our culture. And so, in terms of the virtues, I think. This is not a direct answer to your question, but that's kind of the challenge that I see as I move forward in my life, is to how can I be a part of injecting Christian thinking, at the highest levels across our dialogue in the country, in culture, corporate, etc.
And I'm going to press you just a little bit more. What's that going to take from you? What's the cost for you from a character standpoint if you're going to head in, if that's where you're wanting to go?
Um, I hadn't really thought about if there's a cost or not. I really just kind of thought about what's the opportunity,
Hmm.
and how can that, how can that happen, and what are kind of the people that we need to rally around this, and how does it impact, the the students at Greenville, and the students at Baylor, and the students at other colleges, and how do we do that? And there are a lot of different kind of diverse efforts that are going on, and just finding the right place to plug in and initiate that is, I think it's a challenge. Um, I would say that, if I could just say one more thing, Doug, I think
Sure.
one thing we need to have on your character list that I think is really important is peacemaker.
Yeah.
Um,
For
I mean, blessed are the peacemakers, and never before in our country have we needed peacemakers.
Yeah. For me, the reason something like that wasn't on the list is because I think, of course, from a Christian standpoint, there's another dynamic going on with peacemaking. But I think from a moral character standpoint, it starts with respect, uh, treating every single person as a person of value, or seeing every person, no matter who they are, as a person of value, and then treating them accordingly. And if we would have that kind of respect, then out of that, I think, flows this impulse for peacemaking, because you're not devaluing people, you're not devaluing their position, you're not, you
Hmm.
get the point.
That's very well said.
Yeah. Steve, I mean, you've got huge stuff going on, and we're grateful with the Greenville University situation right now, that in a climate where higher education is under attack from almost every quarter, in one way or another, but especially financially, enrollment, all those kinds of things. You got a huge uh, road ahead to 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 be leading. What's going on in your life right now as you're thinking about the kind of person that you need to be?
Well, the first thing that actually came to my mind when you asked the question earlier, I kind of want to start there, then I'll roll into this part of it. But being my natural personality, and then also the types of jobs that I had for the last 3 decades or so, close to 3 decades, running businesses in that corporate environment, everything is pretty black and white,
Hmm.
and you have to have pretty bright lines between the various areas of what you would perceive to be possible solutions, answers, um, decisions that you're making. And as I've been retired now for 8 years and had been associated with Greenville now for the past 5 plus. In that environment, I've learned, and I am learning, that things are maybe more gray than what
Hmm.
they used to be for me. And I don't mean that in a bad way.
Hmm.
I mean it in a way of my edges have become softened.
Hmm.
The people that I work with, and I worked with them in the commercial secular world also, but you obviously had control over salaries, compensation, that kind of thing. And I'm working with I'm all volunteers now, at least on the board side, all volunteers. You don't have that level of control
Right.
that you had before. And so I'm learning from that perspective of how to work with volunteer workforces, if you will, management groups, all highly intelligent, all have their own viewpoints of things. And how do you mold this together so that we can all go down the same path, trying to achieve, obviously, the mission of the school? So I would say that's a learning for me personally that I'm really trying to focus on, in not being quite so autocratic
Hmm.
in how I manage, etc.
Hmm.
So that's one thing I would say. The other part of my personal life, at this phase of my life, we're privileged to have 7 grandchildren,
Hmm.
and I just feel Jane and I both feel such a burden and privilege in what we can do to speak into their lives and be intentional in setting um, the rules of their lives, setting the type of example that we want them to see and that they would want to emulate one day, and hopefully creating memories that they would say, I remember my grandfather, my grandmother doing such and such and such and such, and carrying that forward in their lives.
Hmm. That's excellent. One of the things that I try to get across to people who are wanting to work on their character is to try to imagine their own funeral and what they would like to have said at that funeral, and to let them know that there's a sense in which you are writing your own eulogy right now, because you're leaving the impression in people's lives that are going to give them the words that they're going to wind up saying about who you were. So, yeah, we're all granddads here on the screen here today, and we all resonate with that. Hey, just before we sign off, was there, I kind of prepped you a little bit with the kind of stuff that we were going to talk about. Anything that we didn't get to that you thought, oh, I want to make sure that I give a shout out to somebody in my life who's made a difference, or an idea that you want to get across? I'll just give you a chance for some closing comments.
Well, I'll say the shout out I would give is my spouse, my best friend, Jane. She's just a great example of what a person should want to be. She's one of the nicest people you'll ever meet, but she's also rock solid in her faith and how she lives her life. And I huge part of the credit that I would give my success in my professional life and also personal life would be just having her there with me, kind of whenever I start to maybe vary and teeter a little bit off the road or off that line. She's very quickly there to to push me back where I should be. So that's what I would say.
Yep. Dennis?
Well, I would second that for Steve's wife Jane, and add for my wife Jana. If you had asked me name the person you admire the most, it would be her.
Mm-hmm.
In every way, and in some ways, she and Jane, the attributes that Steve mentioned, are Jana as well, and just so blessed to have her as my best friend and and soulmate throughout this journey. And as both Steve's traveled a lot, I traveled a lot, and just to have that kind of rock solid relationship is really the most wonderful thing in my life.
Yeah. It's good to hear. Not surprising. Good to hear. I hope our viewers and listeners really take that to heart. There is something about God blessing us with people in our lives that they're our heroes. They're the ones that we look up to. And when it happens to be, and I think by God's design, it can be your own spouse, that just is the best thing. So thank you guys so much. I want to just pray a quick prayer of blessing over you. Father, thank you for this time. I just thank you for being able to have this open conversation that is sprinkled all the way through with little tidbits of wisdom that has been gathered in the lives of Dennis and Steve over the years. Thank you for the influence that they've had. Thank you for the people that they will never know, whose lives were shaped by what they exemplified in terms of character, but also as they're looking ahead and they still have really clear vision of the kind of world that they want to help shape and the kind of people they want to serve. I just pray your blessings over them in every way, with the strength, the wisdom, the insight, and the support that they need to continue to make a mark, to have this fresh impact on the world. I ask this all in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, thanks again, you guys, for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Doug.
Thanks. It was a privilege.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, wow. I mean, wasn't it great to meet Dennis and Steve? I hope you found yourself admiring them like I do, and picking up some pointers about the kind of character that's important, that's influential and impressive, whether you're an executive or a line level employee. Now, if you appreciated this interview, why not subscribe? Please subscribe to this channel. It helps so much. It'll tell YouTube that there are people out there who are interested in this kind of podcast, a podcast about character, being people of character. And I hope you'll tune in next week to meet our last guest of this month, a fascinating guest. She is a person worth admiring, and I can't wait for you to meet her. And until then, why don't you keep looking around for people worth admiring? It'll do you good and the world.